Hi, welcome to Cognitive Leap's Tech Meets Mental Health interview series. In this series, our host, Professor Skip Rizzo, will be engaging in dialogue with various experts in the digital mental health field across the course of the series. So today, our host, Professor Skip Rizzo, will interview Brett Leonard, an award-winning film director. We're so excited to have him here today. So this series, Tech Meets Mental Health interview series, is brought by Cognitive Leap Solutions, Inc. Just a little bit about our sponsor today, Cognitive Leap Solutions. At here, we offer a comprehensive closed loop solution to children's attention and emotional challenges. So our intervention include innovative virtual reality attention tracker, 8 online assessments, precision AI-based brain optimization training, therapeutic music exercise, and family-assisted programs. So our company has a very strong research and development team with world-renowned experts who focus on neurology, cognition, psychology, engineering, and artificial intelligence, which is our topic today. And we are currently working on a FDA study for the approval of our virtual reality classroom that diagnosing ADHD in children. I would like to introduce you to our host, Professor Skip Rizzo. So I'm so happy we have all of our speakers here today. Our host, Professor Skip Rizzo, he is the professor at USC for USC Davis School of Gerontology and USC Keck School of Medicine, Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. And also he is the director for medical virtual reality in the Institute for Creative Technologies. He has been around in the field of virtual reality for a very long time, and he serves as an advisor for Cognitive Leap, exploring different ways to address attention deficit hyperactivity disorder in children. Hi, Dr. Rizzo.
Hey, how you doing, Jessica? Thanks for that kind introduction.
Good. You're welcome. Do you want to introduce our speaker?
Yes, I don't want to eat up a lot of time because we've got a lot of ground to cover, but Brett Talbot, that's a guy I work with, Brett Leonard, it has been an inspiration for me over these years, going back to the very early days when I first became familiar with VR, and it was partly through watching the movie Lawnmower Man, and we'll touch on that, and we'll talk about the old days a bit, and then move forward into the future. One of the things, and to kick this off with Brett, is I just got to say, when I watched that movie in the early 90s, I was just like blown away. And the computer graphics of the day, maybe now you look at it and go, oh, we could do it better. But it was just a pivotal transformation in how you told the story and what the elements of that story involved. And aside from the VR component, you had some sequences in there that were computer graphics of a brain and flying through the brain, the basal ganglia that sticks out. And that inspired me to actually start teaching seminars on visualization of brain and body using advanced technologies like this. When I grew up, I learned that stuff from two-dimensional line drawings that were just horrific. And that really opened my eyes to really this technology was going to be something that was going to come on strong. And so your film and you, as I've gotten to know you over the years, are inspirational for me. So I'm so proud to have you on here. And so why don't we just start off by, telling us about those days and the movie and how it got started, and we'll start there.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for that amazing introduction. And first of all, for a storyteller, to have an effect on people that are actually doing healing work in the world, I can't even tell you where that ranks on my priority list of just making me feel great, because it's amazing to tell a story and have inspire people, and that aspect of it is been one of the things with this particular film, The Lawnmower Man, that just has been a consistent thread from the moment my partner and I, Jamil Everett and I, really conceived of the film until this moment. And it's now, weirdly enough, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, it's almost like I've entered the movie I made 30 years ago. I'm in it now. So, in a way, I become Cyber Job in some weird version of the universe, hopefully a benign and positive version of Cyber Job. So, but anyway, the Lawnmower Man started as a short story by Stephen King called The Lawnmower Man, which was 7 pages long and was about a guy who was chased by a telekinetically controlled lawnmower from a supernatural being from the world of the god Pan, who was chasing him because and this character that was being chased by this telekinetically controlled lawnmower was an abusive father. Okay, so that was the kernel of it, but I had made a film called The Dead Pit. And The Dead Pit was a zombie movie. It was my first film, and it was successful. And it's still one of my favorite films, by the way. If you like zombie movies, go check it out. But that got me the interest of these guys that owned the rights to the Lawnmower Man short story, which had Stephen King's name on it, of course, which is a very valuable thing in the film business, in any business. And I was a huge fan of Stephen King, so that was all good. What I realized is I couldn't make a movie out of that short story. It was just too small an idea for a whole feature film. So I had to basically graft on some other component. Now, this is where my, sort of aggressive, ambitious young filmmaker side comes in. I wanted to make a movie about virtual reality because I had seen this technology that was introduced to me by Jaron Lanier, the man who actually coined the term, at this thing called the Cyberthon in San Francisco, which was, you went to this warehouse in the Mission District, and all these new technologies were being introduced over a 24-hour period. And the idea was to stay awake for 24 hours and get introduced to all these technologies. Of course, it's San Francisco in, the very early, 89, actually. It was the year my film Dead Pit came out. And so, we went there, did the attendant chemicals that are necessary, and we're up for 24 hours going into these incredible work. And there's Jaron with his company VPL, throws a headset, and I was just hooked. I was like, this is going to be the future. That's all I knew. And as a storyteller and as a person who had read so much science fiction, which of course dealt with issues of virtual reality, it's not like it hadn't been introduced. Werner Vinge introduced the idea many, many, many years ago. Right. So, I just said, I want to make a movie about this. And that's where it started. And when I got the chance to make a movie about the Lawnmower Man, I thought, I think there's a way that I could graft this idea onto this idea of a guy being affected and transformed by virtual reality. And he starts out as the Lawnmower Man in this small town, right? So I took that character, not connected to the god Pan or any of those things, but just the character. And then there's one scene in the film, which is the exact dialogue from the short story, which is when the next door neighbor gets, mowed literally by a lawnmower that's telekinetically controlled by Job at that point, who's been modified by virtual reality. Every single beat of that scene after that with the cops is from the short story. So I was trying to honor Mr. King as much as I possibly could. At the same time, I made a completely different story out of it that involved virtual reality, that was written by both myself and my partner, Jamil Everett, who was my partner for many years and my first wife, and has since passed on. And she was very, very instrumental in us, having the courage to do this, at that point. I mean, one thing, I realized this movie would never be made now. I mean, to try to get this story through the system that's going on, I mean, in independent film anyway, now maybe in streaming, that's a whole different animal, but it was a very unique moment of the early 90s independent film movement. And the fact I could take like storyboards that showed this crazy idea, and foreign buyers would go, yeah, we want that. Let's buy it for the German market, And so that's how it happened. And then I got to make the film, and it was made for, on a very, at that time, very moderate budget, $5 million for somebody that had 27 minutes of computer graphic effects. Now, T2, which had come out that same year, had 7 minutes of effects, definitely a different level of effect because it was ILM, but this was a very challenging thing to do on a small, independently budgeted film. And so we needed to find an aesthetic, which I called cyberdelia, right? It's sort of a cyberdelic, psychedelic with cyber connected aesthetic, where we were, celebrating the look of computer graphics. We were celebrating the non-real look of computer graphics, that they were, imaginative and had colors that were more outsized than in real life. And so to this day, some people could look at those graphics and go, oh, that's dated. But if you look at them, there's not a lot of other graphics that are out there that really celebrate that. It's often been about celebrating photorealistic graphics in the Hollywood world, right? And one of the things I'm proud of is that this film actually celebrates a different aesthetic. And so that's sort of the origin story there. Now, there is another thing that actually showed up in my bio, which was the idea that this came from this thing called Cyber God, right? That just erupted on the internet years and years and years ago. And I have no idea where it came from. I have no idea where it came from, but it lives a life to this day. I mean, it's like I had never written a movie called Cyber God or a story called Cyber God. There was never an underlying story called Cyber God that Stephen King made, but somehow in the mix of this whole thing, it got created. And that's an interesting thing. So in a way, that story is a creation of the virtual world.
Wow. Wow. Great story. And was that, were you ready for that kind of fame and attention at that time? Because this was a big deal.
Oh, no. I had, recently moved to California from Toledo, Ohio. So to say I wasn't ready for Hollywood success would be an understatement. It was an amazing ride. Look, I got away with my soul. Many don't. So I feel, I feel blessed in the situation, but I got signed by CAA, Mike Ovitz and the whole, 12 agents in a room with beautiful women holding trays of melty cookies saying, we want to represent you in Hollywood. I mean, when you have a hit film that comes out of nowhere, it's a heady ride. And I realized over, a fairly quick amount of time that none of that meant anything. And really all that means anything is the stories you tell. That's really
exactly. So you went on and did Virtuosity. And
yes.
That was what, 95? Was that
yes.
a connection through this whole era? Or?
Absolutely, yeah. So Lawnmower was this hit. I became, I represented by CAA. They're taking me to the studios. Paramount, which was run by Sherry Lansing at that time. One of the most amazing actual studio head executives ever. And one of the, I think, only 2 or 3 women that have ever run a studio. Also a filmmaker as a producer herself, so she really understood the process. And a man named Gary Lucchese and Howard Hawk Koch Jr., they were all producers that came to me with the backing of Sherry Lansing at Paramount and said, look, we want to make a virtual reality movie with you. You made this virtual reality movie for a little, small amount of money. It made it was a huge hit. Let's go make a bigger studio version of this and something different. So I wanted to make it as different as possible, but it was also still dealing with the idea of virtual reality. And a little bit of a different thing, the sort of behavioral aspects of AI and how a villain could be created within the context, which of course ended up being played by Russell Crowe in his first major lead role in an American movie. I mean, the story there is, I flew him over, paid for his screen test. He slept on my couch a few times. I mean, and nobody knew Russell Crowe. It was like, and he just wanted to play Sid 6.7 so badly. And he was, of course, amazing and has been a good mate of mine ever since. So
cool. So, you did these visionary movies at a time when virtual reality was first popping into the public consciousness. And as we know, there was quite a bit of hype at the time.
I'm afraid I added to that hype.
Yeah, I think so, because everybody thought, oh, we can really do this in real life,
Yeah.
But then, right around when Virtuosity came out, virtual reality kind of took a nosedive in, the Gartner group, say, putting it in the trough of disillusionment and, people saying, oh, it was a failed technology. I mean, a lot of the folks I knew, we saw this vision and knew that eventually it was going to arrive, which I believe it has now. But back then, there was a lot of controversy. And, I remember going to SIGGRAPH and seeing headsets all over the place in 93, 94. 96, there wasn't one headset on the exhibition floor, so there was like this sharp drop off.
Yes.
What was your impression?
Well, look, at the very beginning of Lawnmower Man, there is a textual comment that says, by the turn of the millennium, virtual reality will be, ubiquitously in culture. I mean, so I put it out there, man. And so, but here's the thing. In a weird way, I was immune from that disillusionment because I had told us at that point, 2 stories about it. And those stories were successful. And they stimulated people like yourself and stimulated, the thought. And I always knew it was going to happen. I didn't think it would take this long, in all honesty. I mean, right. I thought it was going to be somewhere in the 2000s. And there were other things we had to go through here, smartphones and the development of all kinds of other aspects that connect to this technology for delivery, especially. And, but I was always sort of like thinking, well, what's the next story to tell? And for me, I kept seeing unique ways that virtual reality could be utilized for things like mental health, for what you're doing. I mean, what you started to do very early on, it was so interesting to me that, wow, this is a quote unquote entertainment thing, but is it really? Is it actually not something that's much more akin to a healing modality that happens to have an entertaining component to it? And so for me, those years were very fertile in thinking about it, in really, cogitating on what it could be, where it could go, and thinking about other stories to tell. So it was, for me, I started doing like experiments in obviously IMAX 3D. I did 2 big IMAX 3D films, which in a sense were close to virtual reality. I mean, a 10-story screen where your peripheral vision is completely part of it captured, and it's 3D to where things come within about 4 feet of your face. That's pretty damn virtual immersive experience. So I did 2 films, T-Rex, Back to the Cretaceous, which was a huge hit. Again, it was photorealistic dinosaurs in IMAX 3D. I mean, we had to invent stereoscopic compositing, dude. It was crazy innovation that went into those films. And I felt that was me reaching towards virtual immersive experience by going into the 3rd dimension and being part of sort of stimulating that new 3D era that happened right then at the beginning of the 2000s. So that was that part of the story.
I think that little point you had in the movie about by the turn of the millennium, I think that subliminally went into my head because in 94, 95, I'm writing papers about how this is going to change the face of cognitive assessment and rehab and mental health. And I thought by 2000, we'd be where we are today.
I know.
It took a little longer, but, along the way, a lot of good
A few more gray hairs. That's
right.
what it comes down to. Yeah.
Totally. So along the way, you've done a whole bunch of other work, and I'd like to I'd like to hear about your latest film, Triumph. But before we do that, we've got a clip.
Yeah,
and Jessica,
the trailer to show.
Yeah,
it's quick. It's less than 2 minutes, so it's a good trailer to show for something like this. And then we can talk about the film.
Let me share this with everyone so we can watch
Jessica.
it together. Thanks. Are you guys able to see the screen?
We do. We see it. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Here it goes.
Biology, English, weightlifting. You know that you can be exempt from PE courses. Cerebral palsy, right?
I like a challenge every now and then.
Stop.
Heading for the short bus?
I wouldn't want to take your seat.
Don't push me! What are you gonna do about it?
Mind your own business.
I'll see you on the mat later.
Just leave me alone.
I've got an idea. Let's go. Do you ever wrestle before?
Wrestling is a real serious sport.
There you go, you got him!
It requires a great deal of athleticism and control. It's very dangerous.
Give me one chance.
Okay. I'm a stack of 8. Knock it out 3 times, then you can try out for the wrestling team. Mike, it's okay.
No!
Anything else you want to try? Can I call you sometime?
Yeah.
There's only 3 more spots on the team.
Dad, I just want to show everybody that I can do this.
No! You're not a wrestler.
You can best anyone with that mind of yours. And prove that.
We're gonna need some more training.
You can do this.
Mike does not see his disability as a hindrance. He's stronger because of it.
Win from within.
There it is.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a different movie than Lawnmower Man.
Yeah, look, one of the things I like to think of myself as a throwback to old school directors of the golden age of Hollywood, like William Wyler, who made a different genre every 6 months. He got to play in all the genres. I love playing in all the genres. Obviously, I'm known for science fiction and VR and thrillers and all that. But and I love those genres, by the way, and I'm going to continue to work in those genres. But to do an inspirational sports story that had this differently abled theme to it has been one of the greatest experiences of my life as a filmmaker. I just came back from a promotional tour because it's open nationwide, April 30th in Cinemark theaters across the country. So if you have a Cinemark theater near you to go see the movie, it's great to see it on the big screen. We actually have a big screen window of distribution, which is very rare these days for a smaller independent film. And many of the premieres, the charity premieres, we're working with the United Cerebral Palsy Foundation and R.J. Mitty, who has cerebral palsy as an actor, very famous from Breaking Bad. He is a real spokesperson and icon in that world. And it's been an absolutely overwhelming experience to watch it with audiences across the country, a lot of disabled children and their families. I mean, it's been overwhelming. The response has been incredible, and it's just been very inspirational and has touched my heart in a way that's very rare in this business.
I think that this movie will have long legs, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a feel-good movie, guys. If you want to see a feel-good movie, this is a movie that makes you feel good. It's also about a real thing. It comes from a real life, so it's authentic. But it is a kind of throwback to feel-good Hollywood movies, which kind of have gone by the way of the dinosaurs these days. And I love making both new style movies and old style movies, and this one has a mix of both.
Well, I think it'll be one that that underscores the title, Triumph.
Yeah.
Underscores people overcoming adversity, and it's a big
and not being labeled, not being limited. Inclusion. The whole movie's about inclusion. The writer had cerebral palsy. The actor has cerebral palsy. I mean, my job was much easier because they understood what this was, and so I just had to follow that. And it was an amazing experience to make the film, to work with RJ, to work with Michael Coffey, who wrote it, producers Michael Clofine and Max Messina and Jonathan Bross, who just put a lot to get this movie done. There's a big story about the making of an independent film. We won't go into that right now because it's its own podcast. But this movie took 6 years to get to the screens. 6 years. Yeah.
Well.
Which is common. It's a common story in independent film, unfortunately.
It's an authentic movie, and it touches your heart. Maybe we need a little bit of that right now after being.
I do.
Down.
I know I do.
Yeah. Well, okay. Now, not to beat Lawnmower Man to death here, but what's the future of Lawnmower Man? We were talking earlier.
Yeah, look, there was a Lawnmower Man 2, which I had nothing to do about, folks, nothing to do with. That they made for about 5 times the money, and it made nothing. It kind of destroyed the franchise, a couple of years after I made the first one. So I am rebirthing Lawnmower Man, literally with a project called Lawnmower Man Reborn. And it is about creating a virtual story world, a virtual experience story world in which the characters of Lawnmower Man and the themes are expressed. And then I want the crowd, the participants, the people that have agency within that story world, through their behavior, being procedurally generating the story of a feature film. So a crowdsourced, procedurally generated, AI collaborative story coming out of the experiences in a virtual world that's based around the Lawnmower Man. That's what I want the future of the Lawnmower Man to be. Now, we're still a little bit away from being able to deliver all those things, but not as far as you think. And so I'm very strongly working on getting that project really off the ground.
Well, when I hear you talk about it, I think to myself, whereas the original was really looking ahead way into the future and visionary and taking a lot of license, this is something that is actually kind of close to reality now.
Yeah, exactly. It's a 5 minutes in the future kind of idea, you know,
Yeah.
and to see what, you know, what all this idea of the virtual world and value in the virtual world, the idea of universal abundance being connected to things like NFTs, the blockchain, crypto, all of these things are part of the virtual reality discussion. They're all virtual. And we are creating essentially a digital twin, a virtual world that we're going to interact with on the foundation of what's called spatial computing. And, you know, that's the trend that's now starting to be created. And virtual experience, VX, as I like to call it, sits as a skin on that spatial computing, you know, foundation. And how we interact with this digital twin, how we interact with each other, what happens to the nature of human intimacy, what happens to the nature of value. Right now, the idea of value is way being disrupted through the NFT world, through crypto and the blockchain, in a way that I think is actually evolutionary and transformative. And so I think there's a lot of great utopian stories to tell around the virtual world and the digital twin, but we also still have to keep our little cautionary notes in there, which of course the Lawnmower Man and Virtuosity were both cautionary tales.
Right, exactly. What's your view of the current state of VR and how you see it being used, and some of the things that get you excited about the field generally, aside from the movie filmmaking element of it?
Yes. So I've moved into, you know, making real VR in the entertainment sense. I shot a movie called Hollywood Rooftop, which was shot in all 360 VR video and simultaneously traditional cinema. And I'm combining the two into an immersive experience that uses the frame, uses cinematic language, and yet you're still in an immersive mise-en-scène. So that's it, just that, which sounds like a very simple idea, like bring a 2D movie and an immersive movie together. No one's really done it, and just playing with that's an experimental thing. So that's a multi-year project I'm on now. We've shot it, it's in the can. We've been going through post. It's all self-funded, so it's a very, you know, experimental project. Seek, Mary Spio of Seek was the original financer on this, and you know, her company has gone through a lot of actually amazing changes, and so we're going to get this out there. But it's a combination of VR and traditional cinema in a way, with, you know, a character-driven, dialogue-driven story. It was written by Mona Lisa Maru, also starring her and a number of her friends from Stella Adler, who were theatrically trained. So I was able to like stage them in the three-dimensional space in a way that was very cogent to how you need to stage for virtual reality. And yet we then went in there with two, you know, second half of the day, went in with two traditional cinema cameras and shot it like a movie. So it was a crazy sort of, you know, head game to do that. And the post-production is a whole other thing, because we're trying to create a language that involves cinematic language. The frame doesn't throw it out, and yet involves immersion. So there's that. That's one of the things that I'm on. But, you know, in terms of what's going on, we're in an amazing moment, Skip. We're in a moment where all this different technology that it's in its own silos is about to pop. And the critical component is, how do we synergize it together, and with what intention? And that kind of gets to, you know, some of the things that you and I are involved with together, which is the idea of using virtual experience in a healing modality connected to new things like, I'll say it, the psychedelic renaissance, which is now utilizing microdosing of psychedelics for mental health issues and showing more efficacy than any other, you know, drug protocols. By the way, there was a front page story on the New York Times 2 days ago about that. So this is not some fringe thing. This is a very real thing that's moving into the mainstream. So we're going to tell mainstream stories about that. And we're also going to create ways of delivering set and setting in a virtual environment that is, you know, connected to these new technology stack that's starting to happen. It hasn't been brought all together yet. I'm still, you know, mostly unimpressed with most of the VR that's been created, because look, I'm a guy from Toledo, Ohio. If it's not going to play for a guy walking down the street in Toledo, Ohio, it doesn't play for me. You know, I want the mass audience. I want the ubiquity. And in order to get to that, we need to make this even more compelling than it is right now. And so I think the moment to do that's now.
Well, I want to touch on the virtual psychedelics in a minute here, but I want to ask you one more question about the translation of traditional filmmaking to the potential of immersing people in the story. We've tried doing this a number of times with some of our PTSD work. Our PTSD work is primarily made to inspire a narrative.
Right. You put people into a narrative, and then a transformative narrative, right?
Yeah, so they can confront and reprocess, difficult experiences. But I know when VR started to really kick in, again in 2015, 14, in that era, there were a lot of people from the traditional film industry that didn't have your background, but that wanted to get on the bandwagon. And there were a lot of wreckages along the way.
Oh, yeah.
Not a simple translation to tell a story in an immersive environment.
Look, it's a new language. I believe there are things we learn from cinematic. I mean, there's a larger discussion to be had around, is virtual reality part of cinema? Is it part of this, expression of that art form and that art form evolving? I believe it is. I'm a cinema guy, right? I start with cinema. I start with the history of cinema. I become a person that tells stories cinematically. And so for me, VR and virtual experience is an extension, a very unique transmortification extension of cinema. So it's not the same language. It's like, here, we're going to evolve. We're going to dump the language, but we're going to maintain certain aspects of the art form. Mise en scène, emotional engagement, the feeling and frequency of a place. All of these things, which are part of creating a cinematic environment in a 2D flatty, are actually very apropos to creating an immersive environment. So I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. At the same time, it is a true transmortification. It is something that actually sloughs the skin of part of what cinema has been and becomes something truly new. And that's where the challenge lies. That's why I'm doing an experiment like Hollywood Rooftop. I just want to experiment. I'm not saying I know. It's like, how do we force feed these things together? How do we do a mashup that actually helps us understand what these two languages are and how they can work together?
Well, I think that what you're describing here is very apropos for the kind of work that's being done in healthcare, mental health. And
yes.
I really think there's a strong place for narrative in these experiences. And I think, if we talk a little bit more about the virtual psychedelics here, the idea of creating an emotionally evocative experience that puts somebody in a story of their own life, a story of something that they want to face and challenge while they're in these states. And, a couple of years ago, I might have said, look at two harebrained schemes, thrown it together, psychedelic therapy and VR, that's going to be a hard sell. But I got to say, the science in the psychedelic area, in the therapeutic use of psychedelic agents is really impressive, and it's real science. It's not just people saying, oh, it's a cool idea. It's randomized controlled trials. A recent study that you reported focused on PTSD. We've seen positive results with substance use disorder, with depression, and it's so interesting because VR has now developed a documented scientific basis where we understand where the good things are and where the things that aren't going to be so helpful. And I think we're on that same path on the psychedelics. What's your view about this now?
Well,
the company Virtual Psychedelics, which for conflict of interest purposes, I have a connection with, as well as scientific advisor and so forth.
Yes, exactly. So Skip and I are both co-founders of a company called Virtual Psychedelics Incorporated, VPI. And Skip said a couple of years ago, that may have sounded like a harebrained mashup of a couple of different things. Of course, for me, virtual psychedelics was kind of what my movie, The Lawnmower Man, was about 30 years ago. So it's a strange connection. And as you know, Skip, everything in life is timing. I mean, timing is everything. And so the psychedelic renaissance, which is we're in the midst of the beginning of right now, has brought a lot of money to the idea of psychedelic research, of psychedelic clinical trials, of behavioral therapy using microdosing of psychedelics, and they are showing tremendous efficacy. So money follows efficacy. And so that's happening, especially in Canada. Virtual Psychedelics is a Canadian corporation, and we are working with other companies in the pharma side of psychedelics that have gone public. About 30 of them have gone public over the last year. So there's a big, rush of money into the space. And what we're providing is not the psychedelics itself, but the idea of virtual experience as a way of controlling the onboarding of a clinical result, a clinical behavioral therapy, the creating the set and setting to make comfortability happen, biometric feedback, actually monitoring a person while they're involved with psychedelic therapy, and then helping them integrate and outboard on that thing. And we think that there's a lot just in that. And of course, Skip, you're one of the people that's been doing this, in actual therapeutic situations and helping healing people for over 20 years. So it was a natural combination. As soon as this sort of idea came up, because what's going on in Canada, the first person I called was you. And just, it's just an extension of what the efficacy is. And we're going to bring together these things. I think it leads to more than just creating set and setting for psychedelic research. It actually creates the ability to create healing environments themselves within VR, possibly even psychedelic experiences within VR where you don't have to take the drug. I mean, I think there's a huge amount of people in the world that would rather not take a drug, and would rather just experience something that was transformative, was healing, had the components that people say are the positive components of psychedelic experience, and yet do it with no side effects. Right. And that, to me, that's a great goal. So that's one of our far horizon goals with virtual psychedelics.
Well, I see a place for VR, not for whole 6-hour therapy session, but strategic junctures where if somebody, depending on what the clinical target is, with a good clinician in there working in collaboration with the client, to at a certain point, they may want something that's more meditative, more inward, some kind of an experience that takes them away from their immediate surroundings while they're initially having this experience. And at other points, it may be, I want to directly confront an issue I've been having once I'm in this state. And here's a virtual experience with a virtual person that I have to talk to, or I have to go to a place that I've been avoiding, or, it's just, to me, this is a wide open area. And as well, I think there's certain experiences that you can craft during that type of therapy that then the user could go back to the VR experience the next day or later on. And even by, a classical conditioning behavioral experience, you had that experience in the session. Now you're bringing part of that experience out with you in a clinical way to carry on. And now that we have, $300 standalone headsets, that's not a harebrained scheme. That's
not at all. Not at all.
Now,
it's amazing to me that, my own activity in the space through this company that both you and I are part of has moved into this idea of helping people with mental health and I could not be more chuffed, as they say in Australia. I lived there for a while, so I got some of the terms. To feel that storytelling has led me to this point where it actually can help people. Wow. I've been sort of a vaudevillian entertainer my whole life as a storyteller on the cinematic screen. And to have that old soft shoe kind of connect to making people actually be better, that is a tremendous moment for me. And you're part of that, man. And I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it.
Well, one of the elements that I know you're really pushing hard on is the idea of building immersive pods or immersive displays that don't require someone to wear a headset.
Yeah, so we should talk about that. We've done a deal with Loeb Sciences. VPI has done a very significant, our first major deal with Loeb Sciences in Canada, which is in the psychedelic pharmaceutical area and device area and delivery system area. They are a publicly traded company, Loeb Sciences, and very much on the move. And they have JV'd with us, joint ventured with us in the creation of what we're calling the Chrysalis Pod. And the chrysalis, of course, is a place where transformation happens in the insect world, right? So, we're creating a chrysalis for virtual experience that will connect with, clinical psychedelic therapy use and other use cases. For me, one of the dreams of delivering virtual experience ever since I made The Lawnmower Man has been, can we do it without strapping something onto our face? Not that the new versions like Quest 2, and I mean, I think we've gone a long way with that, and it's actually quite comfortable and works great. So there's nothing negative about that. But at the same time, for actually doing a psychedelic therapy or a health and wellness use case, to be in an environment that just becomes immersive around you, to not have to strap anything on, to just be relaxed in that and allow that to deliver the virtual experience with biometric feedback, with AI, maybe tracking certain aspects of how the environment's being utilized in the context of the person's experience. That's what the Chrysalis Pod's going to be. And we've just now started on that path of actual development with funding from Loeb Sciences. So it's a very exciting moment.
Well, it's exciting for me because I'm looking at development of this approach beyond, you know, the work we're doing, but also thinking about, can you build these sort of therapeutic experiences that are beyond any of the psychedelics, but, you know, some of the work like I'm doing with Cognitive Leap, with developing applications to help children.
By the way, Cognitive Leap, I just saw the what they are in the beginning of this. That's an amazing company.
Yeah,
They're doing some incredible things.
I'm very lucky to be working with them because they're really committed not only to the mission of developing applications to help children, leveraging VR and other technologies as well. But they respect the science.
And you know, this is so critical because, you know, one of the things I did a long time ago, actually many years ago, I did my 5 laws of VR. I did it sort of as an homage to Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics with a tongue in the cheek, right? But one of them was, the first one was, the stakes are high with this medium. Let's realize that. And, you know, children, this is what it's about. Our children are going to grow up in an immersive world that has virtual experience and virtual interaction for all kinds of reasons. And we need to make sure that this virtual renaissance that we're going into, that's been, you know, actually accelerated by the COVID pandemic, you know, it's actually been an inflection point for that. We have to make sure that we understand this changes neuronic pathways. This is very powerful. It's more powerful than watching a movie. It's more powerful than any media form ever created before. And so we need to really focus it on good. I mean, it's really simple. I mean, it's like there's this, you know, there's an organization out there called VR for Good that Oculus is part of. And, you know, that's exactly right. Because VR for bad is a really bad thing. And I made a couple of movies about it. So
yeah, right. Cautionary tales.
Yes, exactly.
Early on. Yeah, well, all right. We in a couple of minutes we're going to open up for questions, but I always have a couple of curveballs out of the blue here that I like to toss out.
I love the curveballs, man.
Yeah, well, you know, being involved in the field for years,
yes,
there's a special kind of person that becomes enamored with the field of VR.
It's true.
You know, and I see it now with the young folks that are coming into the field.
Yes,
they got that same spark.
Oh my God,
you see in the folks in the '90s and everything. What's your take on what kind of person loves VR?
Well, look, you know, obviously, you know, I think both you and I, we work with a lot of millennials. We work with a lot of people that are, you know, now Gen Z. And by the way, we're doing that for them. It's going to be for them. You know, it's so of course. But, you know, it's when I saw this, you know, VR companies erupt like mushrooms everywhere, and everyone was jumping into it. And just at first I was a little annoyed, in all honesty. I was like, hey, man, we've been in this for 25 years. What the hell, you know? But, you know, as it matured and as, you know, some of the money went the wrong places initially, there was a big hype cycle, as you're very aware of. And but the true believers, the ones that are really realizing what VR and virtual experience can be, they're the ones it's boiled down to now. And I think it's a very, very wonderful time there's a lot of consciousness around, we've got to do this right. And one of the things, you know, speaking at VR conferences, which have been virtual all this last year, of course, but, you know, and you know, interacting with a lot of younger people and talking at colleges. And then there's my friend, Alex McDowell, who runs the, you know, the world building lab at USC where you are. And Alex was he was the production designer on The Lawnmower Man. That was his first movie. He became the production designer on Steven Spielberg's Minority Report, Watchmen, many. I mean, one of the biggest production designers in the world, but he started on The Lawnmower Man. We have been actually, moving in the same direction separately for many years. We're now coming together. He's going to be part of our pod team, and so the USC World Building Lab, which I've spoken at a few times, those people who are coming from every discipline. That's the thing. This is not about just people wanting to get into the movie business or the entertainment business. This is people from architecture and civic planning and healthcare and economics, all coming together. It's a truly multidisciplinary group of people, and that's what's so amazing about it for me, because it stretches me. It's a big yoga stretch.
Exactly. I have that same experience all the time with people from different disciplines, that if I was in my field in a traditional format, I would never have a conversation with them. I wouldn't know about what they know.
Exactly.
That inspires you to think about your work in a different way.
And I think that's one of the critical things with virtual experience, with VR, with this whole idea of creating the virtual world. We need to understand it is a much greater multidisciplinary process than any media production has ever been before. I've made big special effects feature films. Yes, that's a big Megillah. It ain't as big as what this takes. This takes a lot more openness to different language systems, openness to hugely out of the box viewpoints of what's going on. And that to me is actually part of the, really the benefit of it. It's again, stretching me to really open myself to all kinds of other new things. And it just naturally happens with VR because, as you said, the kind of person that's brought into this, they're very unique people.
Last question, and then we'll dig into the audience questions. Do you think you could ever retire?
No, I don't believe in retiring. There is no retiring. John Huston was directing The Dead from the James Joyce book on the set with an oxygen tank, barely alive. He's directing his daughter, Angelica Huston. I mean, I'm of that ilk. I want to be directing when I go.
Yep. Yeah, I get it. I'm there with you. I'll be there with you.
Cool, man.
Okay, well, Jessica, do we have some questions from the audience that we can do?
Yeah, we have a lot of questions from the audience. Let me just share the screen and we can get started. I'll basically mention a couple of them that I think it's really worth our time to talk about.
Sure.
So someone during the talk, you mentioned that you're in the middle, maybe potentially making the rebirth of the Lawnmower Man. Someone asked if it's possible to watch it through a VR platform, where have you some thoughts on that?
Yes, it will be viewable through VR platform, but it's not the VR platforms that necessarily exist right at this second. It's going to be there's a whole new era of computing happening called spatial computing. I really encourage you go. There's actually a book called The Spatial Computing Revolution, I believe, by Dan Mapes and his partner in a company called Versus. Dan's a very good friend of mine. Versus has created the spatial computing protocol. It is now a protocol that's been certified by the IEEE as a social imperative standard. So think about this. Those of you that remember the history of the internet, there was AOL, and it sent out a floppy disk or a CD for you to get email, and then TCP/IP came along and HTTP and created the World Wide Web, and then that became the dumbest gated community imaginable, and everything expanded to the $1 trillion economy of the internet. That is about to happen with spatial computing right now. Literally this year is the beginning. And it's a whole new era of computing. That virtual experience will be the skin upon to interact with the digital twin. That's the platform that I want to have Lawnmower Man Reborn go out on. Something that is truly embedded. First of all, there's data sovereignty that is native to the open spatial computing protocol. It's open source, by the way. And there is exchange, fungible and non-fungible crypto exchange native in the code. So imagine if the internet, the TCP/IP had those things native right now, we would be in a very different world. And so this is a very exciting moment, and That's the medium I want to create Lawnmower Man Reborn in.
Wow.
Wow, I'm so excited to actually experience all the new technologies that become so available for everyone on the internet. And then just talking about new technologies, can you talk a little bit more about volumetric filmmaking?
Sure.
Someone in the participant mentioned that.
Yeah, so there are different forms of volumetric filmmaking. Obviously, there's actual volumetric capture, which is, there's many different ways of doing it where you're capturing a point cloud of data, and then you're able to go in and really use that data in any way you want. That's filmmaking where you capture a scene, you capture the people, and then you're able to go put the camera and do anything you want in post-production within the context of that data cloud. That changes everything. The truth is, volumetric capture is going to supplant photography. The idea of photography is going to be morphing into the idea of volumetric capture. Now, doesn't mean certain tenets of photography won't be around for a very long time. They will. But you're going to be able to execute them within the context of capturing things volumetrically, way beyond 3D, 360 video VR capture, which is a very rudimentary form of that.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I didn't really have much experience in filmmaking, or so. Like hearing you talking about it sounds very, very exciting.
It's getting to the point where with things like volumetric capture, there was a great science fiction writer, I think Poul Anderson, who once said, the great filmmakers of the future will be the ones that can dream the hardest. You're literally going to have technology that takes your dreams literally from the mental state and puts them into being. I know that sounds like far-flung. It is actually closer than you think. And so if you're getting into this area of storytelling and this new media right now, think outside the box, because the box's walls have been flattened, especially with what's going on in the world right now. And that's an amazingly exciting time to be a part of.
Yeah, and then building up upon what you just said earlier about making films using around the new technology, it's like forming new narratives using different languages. So one of our attendees asked this question about if you can talk a little bit more about forming narrative using VR. Like, are you familiar with the concept of narrative medicine? Like, how are we going to apply this into creating treatment, even potentially in the future?
Well, that's exactly what Dr. Skip Rizzo here does, first of all. And that's why I've partnered with him in this company, Virtual Psychedelics Incorporated, because we're creating narratives that are healing, narratives that are medicine, and doing it in the context of sometimes working directly with psychedelic therapy, and there's a renaissance going on there as well. But really, it's about looking at the semiotic level, looking at what are the parts of narrative that have been, transformative to humankind. Humankind is always transformed first around the dreams, then the storytelling of those that dreamed and told stories. And so how are we going to bring that into the medicine that we need on this planet right now, especially when we're dealing with something as powerful as immersive experience in a virtual world? I mean, the stakes are high. My first law of VR, I won't even tell you the other ones. The stakes are high.
Yeah. Okay. I think these are all the questions we have. And someone also commented on that there's a company called Microdose VR. They provide VR psychedelic experience.
Well, I've just been talking with one of the founders of that today, earlier today, one of the financiers of Microdose. So, this is a great time where these companies are again, springing up like mushrooms, pun intended. And so we're all going to work together. There's a lot of energy to work together to help create this psychedelic renaissance and do it in concert with technology like virtual experience, like we're bringing with VPI, in a way that is really positive for world culture. And that feeling is really great.
I see Greg Panos is out there, and he was the first guy to put me in a VR headset.
Yes.
Back in the
Greg was one of the early people I talked to. He was at that Cyberthon. He was one of the formative thinkers, always has been in the virtual space. He was talking about avataristic versions of human beings before anyone knew what the hell that meant. I mean, he was creating, these things. And Greg, I'm glad you're out there, and it's always great to acknowledge, your thought process. This led to me being able to make movies like The Lawnmower Man. It's people like Greg that really were the foundation of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Well,
think these are our questions today.
Okay, great.
all right,
Yeah,
Jessica.
thank you. Yeah, thank you guys for coming to our event today. Brett, thank you so much for having this amazing conversation with Professor Rizzo, because especially for me, like as a student, I'm currently a college student, and I definitely feel like this is such an amazing experience, just being in this at this time when everything's going to explode so quickly, that I'm excited for the future that lies ahead for the VR, especially with putting it into film and then using a different type of narratives to even better the lives for a lot of people. So I'm so super excited for what we've talked about, and I'm so thankful that you're here today to talk to us. And I'm pretty sure that our audience have learned so much from this conversation as well.
Well,
So
Jessica,
just moving on.
when you're 70 years old, I hope you remember this day, because you'll be
I
seeing a
will.
world that will already be planted.
Yeah.
And you'll be seeing
Yeah.
that world. You'll say,
And
"Oh,
it'll be a lot more wild than anything we've talked about here. And we've talked about some wild things.
You are, like, I'm pretty sure in like 10 years or so, when everything we've talked about becoming true, I'll be thinking about this conversation and think, wow, like people I've talked to are actually the pioneers in this industry that like formed this. So I'm so excited to
We're trying.
I have
Hey,
very high hopes.
Jessica, before we go, let me just make a quick pitch for our next podcast, which will be next month. I think it's the second Thursday. I'm not sure. Oh, you have it here. Linda
Yes.
Jacobson, again, one of the pivotal thinkers in the early days, worked with SGI, inspired me. One of the first VR events that I went to. And anyway, so Linda will be joining us next month. Do you have anything you wanted to add or anything, or are we good?
Right. I just thank everyone for listening. And Skip, it's absolutely great to talk with you, and also great to be working with you on all these amazing things we're starting to create in the world. All right, man.
All righty.
Yeah.
Aloha.
And then
everybody.
one last thing about our cognitive leap, as everyone's talked about, we've working very hard to get this VRAT approved from the FDA, so we can help a lot more kids with ADHD to diagnose them better. So currently we have 4 study sites set up. So if you're interested in participating with children aged from 6 to 13 who are eligible, please scan the QR code at the bottom right corner, and we'll contact you about further instructions on where you can participate. So thank you so much for, once again, thank you for our speaker today and having this amazing conversation. Thank you, Professor Skip Rizzo, for hosting this. And I hope I can see you in our next event.